Okay, so after a bit of a false start, we'll go ahead and get started today. We are here for the informational webinar for the Nevada STEMworks initiative. This is an informational webinar for programs that are interested in submitting a proposal or an application to Nevada using the STEMworks program. And if you have any questions along the way, please just interrupt me and let me know. We're going to be going through a bit of the process, and then we'll get into an overview of the design principles that Change Equation has developed that are the core of the application. So with that, since we're running a little behind, let's go ahead and get started. Just to let you know, my name is Marc Loveland. I work at Wested. I'm located in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I've been the project director for our work with Change Equation on STEMworks for the last 5 years or so now. And so I'll be working with the folks in Nevada, and I have a couple other people working here as well. So if you need anything or have any questions or have any problems, please let us know. There is contact information on the application site that I'll refer to in just a minute. Klaus, you want to just say a quick hello?
Yes, this is Klaus von Jastrow with Change Equation. I know some of you already, and basically just wanted to say I'm delighted that you're interested in participating in this Nevada process this year. I know that Nevada's been working very hard to make all of this work, and I don't know yet if Brian Mitchell from Nevada can join us today, but if he can't, what I'll do is I'll say a little bit about some additional questions at the end that Nevada has added to this process, and also to say that by making it in through this Nevada process, you can kind of give yourself something like most favored nation status with Nevada as they consider some of their grant making. Even though this is not an actual grant for funding, it does mean that you can put yourself on lists from which various agencies in Nevada, particularly the Education Department with their college and career readiness grants, will be looking as they consider their funding options. So it could be a really strong way to get your foot in the door in Nevada.
All right, thank you, Klaus. Brian, I don't see you on the webinar, so I'm going to assume that Brian is not on the line, but we will refer back to some of the particulars and specific details for the Nevada submission window, and so we'll maybe push that back to the end, and if Brian does join us, then we'll have him talk a little bit. In the meantime, let's go ahead and get started. What I wanted to just start out with is a quick overview of what STEMworks is in the broader sense. STEMworks is a database of STEM education programs that have been able to demonstrate their impact on student learning or teaching through a variety of different programs. And if you go to Change the Equation's website, you can see all the programs that are listed in STEMworks, and each program has a profile, and you can see that there are programs that are listed as accomplished and other programs that are listed as promising. These are just two different levels that programs can sort of attain depending on the results of their application review. We can talk about that a little bit more after we go through the principles and the application process, but please take a look, if you haven't already done so, take a look at the STEMworks website, and you'll see that there are just a wide range, a wide variety of different types of programs that are in the database. There are in school, there's out of school, there's classroom programs, there are informal programs, after-school, summer programs, teacher, professional development programs, almost anything you can think of. There are probably programs in the database that are focusing on that. Again, there's also different areas of STEM that programs focus on, different age groups, different target audiences. It is, I think, just an interesting way to get familiar with the kinds of programs that are in STEMworks. So please, I encourage you to go through the STEMworks website and take a look and just kind of get a sense of the kind of work that's being done by the programs that are already in the database. So from that page, you can get a link to the application site. Everything is done online. You'll see that there's a general STEMworks application site. There is a How It Works page for each state that is involved. We've done this state-level application process with about a half dozen states, and so there are some that are concurrently going on. So please just make sure that you are paying attention to the right state as you go through the application website. The first thing as a program that you want to do is fill out your program profile. This is all very straightforward, pretty basic information that we're asking for. Some of this will ultimately end up, if your program is featured on the website, some of this may end up being on your profile. So again, all of this is done through the website. You'll get notifications. Once you register, you'll get access to fill out your program profile. Once you complete your program profile, you will be asked to do what we call a quick pre-screening process. Just to give you a sense of what this means, there are a number, as I said, a number of design principles that form the basis of the application. And in order to address the criteria that are specified in those design or by those design principles, we ask for documentation pretty much across the board. Anytime you're asked for something, you're going to be asked to also submit documentation that supports any statement, any claim that you make, any description that you make. So, for example, if we're asking about something with your business model, we would want to see some financial documentation. If you're talking about your partners, we want to see a list of the list of partners that you're working with and descriptions of their roles. If you're aligned to certain standards, we'd want to see those alignment documents. So because everything is based on documentation, we do a quick pre-screening just to make sure that programs have the most basic documents available. So you'll see things on the pre-screening site that are things like a strategic plan, an annual report, a budget report, list of partners, evaluation plan. So we just ask that you check those that you have, upload them, and there'll be a quick review. Once that review is done, you're given the A-OK to access the actual application site. So if you have any questions about that later on, please don't hesitate to ask. This takes us into the application site. You'll see that the way the application is set up, those 10 design principles that I was referring to are listed, and each box opens up to give you access to 3 different things. What we ask for from each program on the application is for 3 things related to each of these 10 design principles. I'll go through the design principles in just a few minutes, but on the application, and what you see here is the view that the reviewers actually see, but it's very similar when you go in as a program to complete the application. The first thing you're going to be asked to do is to provide a self-rating for that principle for your program. We've provided a rubric, which again, I'll go through in just a minute. But we ask that each program first provide a self-rating, then they provide an explanation. So you can see there's a text box where you can provide an explanation for how you feel the program, your program, addresses the different criteria and the different levels within the rubric, and why that justifies whatever self-rating you gave yourself. Just so you know, there's 3 levels, and again, I'll go through some of this in a little bit more detail, but 3 levels for each principle. At the lowest level, it's called undeveloped. Basically, that means that it's an area that your program hasn't really looked at all. It's something where, are people still there? Oh.
Yes, I'm here. Are others?
I'm here. Yeah, we're here on the phone. Camilla.
Okay. Did I lose the PowerPoint? Okay.
I'm having trouble. Now you're back.
Okay. I don't know what happened there, but it just sort of blinked off. Okay. So as I was saying, the rubric has 3 levels. The lowest level is undeveloped. Really, that just means that as a program, you feel, or the reviewers will feel, that you haven't really addressed it at all. Developing is kind of an intermediate level. It means that based on the criteria in the rubric for that principle, you've addressed some of it, but you still have areas where we think you could do more. And again, this can work on a couple of different levels. This can be both in where your program is, but it also might be where your application is. So if you write about certain things, but then don't provide any documentation to support your explanation, then the reviewers might say, okay, well, based on what you've written, we're going to put you at developing, but you might get feedback that says, in order to be accomplished, we need to see more documentation of your alignment to certain standards, something like that. So developing, again, means it can mean one of 2 things. It can mean that's just where, based on the evidence and based on your explanation, that's where you think you are, and that's where the reviewers think you are. But it also might mean that there's something missing that the reviewers are looking for that you might be able to provide as a follow-up. So accomplished really means that you've overall addressed the criteria in that accomplished column. You've provided documentation to support your explanation. You've provided things in detail with specific references to documents that support that explanation. So as we go through the different principles, you'll see a little bit more of how this looks on different levels. So as I said, we've got 10 different design principles that Change the Equation has developed. You'll see that there are 6 overarching principles, and these are related more towards the program as a whole. And then we have 4 STEM-specific principles, and these really focused on the aspects that make a program a STEM program. And so I'm going to go through each of these principles and kind of give you a quick overview of what they look like and some examples of kind of what good and better applications look like for these principles. As I mentioned, there's also a companion rubric that goes along with each of the design principles. In that rubric, you'll see, as I was just mentioning, 3 levels described with criteria in each level, and again, accomplished, developing, and undeveloped. We've also, in the rubric, provided some sample evidence, things that you might want to be looking for as documentation to support your explanation in addressing the criteria in the rubric. I cannot stress enough, as you saw before, and I'll just click back, this is what the reviewers are going to see for your application. So if you have pretty much the same view when you go through your application and are completing it, except that you don't have those radio buttons, the little blue buttons in the rubric. That's how the reviewers sort of rate the program or keep track of where they think the program is as they're doing their individual reviews. But so just, again, I can't stress enough, reviewers are looking at your program on a principle-by-principle basis, reading the explanation, using the documents that you're providing to support the rating, to support the explanation, and they are looking line by line through the rubric to see, have you addressed the criteria that I described. So I highly recommend that as you are filling out your explanation, as you are completing your application, that you organize your explanation to essentially address each line of the rubric for that principle. That is the easiest way to make it clear to the reviewers what it is that your program is doing relative to each of those design principles. I'll just make a quick note. The documents that you're uploading, the evidence that you're using to support your explanations, those are all in the form of a PDF. It's just the easiest way to make it so that everybody can access the documents. So it's a very quick, easy upload process. It's just like uploading a document to almost any website. It's very straightforward. And I would also add that in addition to organizing your explanation according to the rubric, please make clear references to those documents. If those documents are supporting your explanation, as you're going through your explanation, say, please refer to our annual report, which describes the role of each of our partners in our program. So make clear references to the documentation. If these documents are big, and sometimes we get very large, say, evaluation reports, please refer to the specific pages that you want the reviewers to look at. Do not make this difficult for the reviewers to read through your application. We understand that it takes time and a lot of energy to complete an application, so we just don't want that energy and time to be wasted because the reviewers have to wade through 300-page documents to find the one sentence that you're referring to in your explanation. Reviewers are reading through multiple applications, and so with any application process, please make it as easy for the reviewers to go through your application. All right, so as you get into the application, you'll see that these 10 principles are, again, outlined in more detail in the rubric. And again, the rubric is featured on the application. Within each design principle, you'll see for that section, you select your rating for your self-rating for the program. You provide the explanation. You have your documentation uploaded to support it. You're making clear references to the documentation, and you are organizing it so that you are addressing each of the lines of the rubric. So to start off with our overarching principle, there's a quick note at the top of the rubric that talks about how the rubric has been designed so that there's a flow that comes directly from the first two principles, principles A and B. Principle A talks about the need that is being addressed by the program. Does the program address a compelling and well-defined need? It also talks about the target audience that you are serving and how that target audience is related to that need that you're addressing. The second principle, which I'll get to in just a second, principle B, refers to evaluation. Evaluation is really how well is the program defining its goals that it wants to do in terms of addressing that need for that target audience, and how is it monitoring progress or success in terms of addressing those goals. That's done through evidence from an evaluation process. So those two principles really set the tone and provide the basis, the foundation for the rest of the application. You'll see as we go through the other principles that they are consistently referring back to how is this addressing the need, how is this helping to address the need for that target audience, and what is that evidence that's showing that you are accomplishing the goals that you have set for your program. So as I go through the rest of the principles, just pay attention how strongly they tie back to those first two principles. So as I said, the first principle, A, looks at the need. Does the program address a compelling and well-defined need? I'm just going to go quickly through some of the lines under accomplished to give you a sense of kind of your bar that you're looking for, at least that reviewers are looking for. Again, there's a statement of need that is clear, compelling, and supported by recent, valid, and targeted data. The second line says the program makes clear that it adds unique value in addressing the need. Those two lines together are critical. If you are a after-school science program for girls, there are many options for after-school science programs for girls. We as reviewers want to understand what your program is doing that makes it unique or that makes it stand out from other programs that are serving a similar need or serving a similar target audience. So we want to understand, A, that you understand what the need is. So if you just say we are helping girls across the country perform better in science, well, is that really a need? There should be data that helps to support that. Recent test scores, recent assessment scores, NAEP assessment scores. Whatever it is that provides us with an understanding of what that need is, then you want to address who that is being targeted. That's the third line, the target audience. And then again, all of that helps us to understand what is it that you are doing to address that need for that target audience. We'd love to see other references to other similar programs and help us understand if there are two other programs that you consider are doing some of the same work that you're doing, how are you different? Please try to identify other programs that are doing similar work and how you compare or stand out compared to those programs. And then lastly, we talk about program can demonstrate that it is reaching the target audience. So if you say you're addressing girls after school interested in STEM and improving STEM or science performance, we need some demographic data to be able to see that you're actually addressing that target audience for that specific need. So what does this look like in an actual application? I've got two examples here. Both of these are actually pretty good. Later on, you'll see we've got some better and some worse examples. These are just snippets from actual applications. The names have been changed to protect the innocent in some cases, but what you'll see here is that in the explanation for need, you want to see references to documents that have data on either student math achievement or scores from specific age groups in specific areas, science and math. Again, both of these explanations actually do a pretty good job of referencing data. Again, some of these are a little more detailed. We love more details. And again, just addressing each of the lines in the rubric. Another area to pay attention to, again, is how some of these explanations specifically refer to those documents. We're not going to go through the documents themselves, but you can see that the easier you can make it for reviewers to see the documentation that's supporting the explanation, the better they're going to feel about the application as a whole. The next principle, as I said, talks about evaluation. Does a program use rigorous evaluation to continuously measure and inform progress in addressing the compelling need identified in Principle A? Do you need to have a third-party evaluator? No. Do you need to be clear in your own evaluation of your program and its goals? Yes. Accomplished doesn't mean that you have to have a third-party evaluator, but you should have an evaluation plan if you're doing it yourself. You should have well-defined goals that are directly, again, here we go, directly linked to the statement of need and the identified target audience. You should be able to provide data on that from that evaluation that you've conducted if you're doing it yourself. This is the first time, but not the only time, where I would ask and stress that when providing things like evaluation reports, please provide the complete report. Summaries of reports are virtually meaningless for the reviewers. If you have a survey and you provide a summary of the survey, that's meaningless to the reviewers. They want to see what are the questions that you're asking in the survey. What is the data from that survey? Summaries are really not valuable at all. All it does is raise a red flag to the reviewers to say, well, where is the actual report? Where's the actual data? Where is the actual information that you are using to in providing your explanation? So again, please, whenever possible, do not provide a summary or an executive summary. Please provide the full report and make reference to where in the report you want reviewers to pay attention to based on what you're providing in your explanation. Any questions about those first two principles? Again, it's critical that those first two are clear and detailed to establish the reviewer for the rest of the application review. Okay, then what I'm going to do, and again, here's a couple examples for evaluation. The first two, or the first one, describes how they use teacher and student surveys to improve program delivery. They've got goals listed. The second one, I just wanted to point out, this is where they just provide some summaries of things. We don't see reference to the actual evaluation report. They just show that they do some surveys, and again, I encourage you to be as specific as possible. Again, whether or not you're using a third-party evaluator, just make sure that your program goals are clear, tied to the target audience, tied to the specific need, and that your data is clear in terms of what impact you are having on addressing your needs with your target audience. Okay, from here on out, I'm going to be a little bit shorter. You can read through these. They're pretty self-explanatory, pretty clear. I'm just going to give you a couple sort of tips on each of these as we go through them. The third principle, Principle C, looks at sustainability. Does the program ensure that the work is sustainable? This is not intended to say, are you financially set for the next 10 years? This is basically getting at, what's your revenue model? How are you taking advantage of opportunities that you might have, things like matching funds, favorable state or local policies? What are the challenges that you have? If a reviewer, here's a quick example. If you are a pay-for-services, fee-for-services program, so a school adopts your classroom curriculum, they have to pay X amount for each student. Well, for that kind of model, reviewers are going to want to know, okay, well, how are you marketing to these schools? How are you pricing your program so that it is reasonable? We ask for projected benefits to teaching and or learning justify the cost per participant. We ask for that specifically. So again, questions that reviewers have are going to be based on details that they are going to want to see. So financial reports, budgets, where your revenue is coming from, if you're grant-driven, if you are, again, fee-for-services driven. We just want to understand those details. And again, this ties into the overall ability to address the need for that target audience that you referred to before. This is just a quick snapshot of this. The first one, and again, more is not always better, but most of the time it is. The first example here gives some very specific details around opportunities that they've taken advantage of to develop their funding streams. They have their cost per student data there. They justify what that entails. They talk about relationships that they've developed with stakeholders. The second example is just really much has much fewer details. One common problem for sustainability, beyond not providing the documentation or the evidence for the reviewers to see, is to just say, we've grown. We've gone from 2 states to 5 states in 3 years. Just because you've had rapid initial growth does not mean the same thing as being set up for sustainability in the near term or long term future. So again, please avoid marketing speak. Do not just say, we've grown this much. You can say how much you've grown, but we want to understand how and why you've grown. Is it because you're affordable? Is it because you have you've taken advantage of sustainable revenue streams? So again, more details is always appreciated over just bold statements that don't have anything really to support them. Replication and scalability, recognizing that some programs may be very local, that's fine, but one of the objectives of STEMworks is to identify programs that are ready to reach a broader audience. So if you've, in the previous principle, talked about how you've grown recently or over a certain period of time, we want to know how that works. How are new programs, how are new sites identified? What do they have to do to adopt your program? What kind of documentation is provided to those new sites or new customers? How are you working within those communities or those states or those areas that you are expanding into? So again, as much documentation as possible. And again, do not just say, well, we've grown from 5 to 20 states in the last 3 years. So that's how we demonstrate that we are able to scale and replicate our program to new audiences. That's great. You might get developing for that statement, but we want to know how that process happens. Again, it can be everything from marketing, it can be everything to what kind of professional development do you provide for new users, what kind of manuals or support do you provide, how do you communicate with those new sites as you're expanding. So again, just please pay attention to those details. Again, we want to just know that if you've been growing, are you able to maintain fidelity of implementation across the board as you're growing? So again, a couple of examples. The first one really talks about some details as they've implemented their program in new districts, new schools. They have an MOU that partners or new partners sign. Again, they've got examples of that. Documentation-wise, they provide a map that talks about specific steps that have been taken in terms of growth. The second one is a good example of basically just talking about, we've got great technology and you can see our growth. We've grown 500% since our first year in 2011. Not a lot of documentation, not a lot of evidence, not a lot to help reviewers really understand what that process involves. So again, just please pay attention to those details, pay attention to the criteria in the rubric, and address those directly as much as you can within your explanation. The next principle looks at partnerships. This is a good example of where Again, programs often lack details in their application and end up at developing, even though they probably could be at accomplished. Does the program create high-impact partnerships where beneficial? Again, it's pretty straightforward. Do you have partners? Maybe they're helping with content development. Maybe they're helping advise on best practices for how students learn, or they are helping in providing actual materials or advice on how you're growing. Customers are not really partners unless they are like a district that is working with you to identify their needs. So just, again, be careful. But the big part of this is that you don't just provide a list. If you just provide a list of 8 different partners that you have, again, that might be good enough for the pre-screening, that might be good enough for developing, but we want to understand what those partners are doing. So some description of what those roles are, how they're contributing to the ongoing work that you're doing as a program. And those documents can be letters of support, MOUs, as I mentioned before, partnership agreements, but it might be in an annual report talking about what your partners are doing. But just something beyond a list. It's really difficult for a reviewer to understand what these partners are doing beyond just the names of who you're working with. So again, please provide more details than less. This is another example. The first one is, I would say, more on the developing side. They've got an extensive list of partners, but again, they just have a partners list. The second example really goes into more detail, who they're working with and what the roles are for those partners. And again, you can see they've got, they refer to a partners list, but with explanations of resources that each partner contributes, and they have an MOU template that is provided as well to see how they are documenting those relationships. And then last of the overarching principles, looking at capacity, organizational capacity. Does the program have the capacity to meet its goals? And again, we're just looking for some details to understand where your program is. Again, if you are focusing on specific areas of STEM, if you're focusing on science or technology or engineering, your staff should have that expertise in those areas. We've seen many applications from programs that have got, their marketing team outnumbers their content team, 10 to 1. Not that that's a bad thing, especially if your program is growing, but we just want to make sure that content part is there, that expertise is there. We want to understand how staff are trained. If you use volunteers, how do those volunteers get brought on? What does your organization look like? So again, some basic things like an organizational chart, bios or CVs or resumes for your senior staff, so we understand who's doing what and do you have the capacity to continue growing and doing the things that you say you're doing to address that need. So again, this is one where you might get caught up where you just provide an organizational chart. That gets you part of the way there, but again, the reviewers just really want to understand what your organization is doing and how you are, and this again refers back to those goals that are defined in the evaluation section. So it all ties back to what your need is, who your target audience is, what your goals are. Is it obvious to the reviewers that your organization is addressing all those through your staffing, through your training, through your professional development for the people in your organization? So again, a couple of examples. The first one is the one that's a little more detailed. They've got an evaluation plan, which again refers back to those goals. They talk about who's doing what. They've got an organizational chart with resumes. They've got a staff evaluation rubric. The second one basically just talks about the CEO, how great he is and what he does, but they don't provide any details about the organization as a whole or the things they're doing to address the need. from the first principle. Any questions about those first 6 overarching principles? Okay. Again, I just stress, provide details, be clear in providing those details, help the reviewers understand the various aspects that are being asked for in the rubric. And that will get you a long way towards being accomplished in each of those overarching principles. The next 4 principles are the STEM-specific principles. The first 3 are really sort of critical in defining the program as a STEM program. Recognizing that these 3 principles really should be integrated within your program, we've teased them out into 3 specific principles to look at. 1, challenging and relevant content. 2, STEM practices. And then 3, inspiration. And I'm just going to go through these real quick. I don't have examples of these because these are really focused on documentation. Challenging and relevant content is pretty straightforward. Is your program aligned with relevant standards? For in this case, obviously you want to be paying attention to what's going on in Nevada, so be sure to check on that. We talk about does your program reflect high expectations for all participants? Do you have assessments for your participants? Do you have ways of understanding, are your participants achieving? Are they performing? Are they learning? Are they improving their teaching practices? So again, from a content perspective, are there expectations and are there ways of documenting whether those expectations are being met? We talk about real-world applications of STEM where possible, again, connecting it to the content. Do you apply or transfer that content to new or unexpected situations, or is it just, memorization of facts? We're looking for a little bit deeper application of the content here. Again, examples, documentation, evidence. Just providing, this is another good example. If you just provide a list of, here are all the units that are part of our curriculum program, and here's the state standard next to the name of each unit, that, again, might get you developing, but a reviewer's going to want to see, okay, well, show me some examples of your curriculum. Show me examples of your agenda, the activities that the students are doing in your after-school program or in your summer camp. Again, provide details, provide explanations that are detailed, but provide examples of the things that your program is doing. Examples of lesson plans, examples of activities, examples so that the reviewers can actually go in and say, yeah, I can see what you're doing here. This is really addressing that content standard really well. Just a list, again, is only going to get you part of the way there. Similarly with STEM practices, this encompasses a wide range of skills that across, again, the 4 disciplines of STEM that effective STEM programs have been shown to promote. Some of these are 21st century skills, some of these are specific to math or science or engineering, but across the board it's important that you, again, provide those examples, provide lesson plans, provide complete descriptions of activities that your participants are doing, so that the reviewers can see, are you addressing these specific skills, these specific competencies, these specific things that we want students to be able to do in terms of learning STEM. And then the last one that is focusing on helping us understand your program as a STEM program looks at inspiration. You may be a program that doesn't have a whole lot of content, maybe you don't have a whole lot of hands-on project-based learning with the skills, but you're a program that makes science fun, you're a program that makes math interesting, you're a program that makes kids more interested in being an engineer. The critical part for this principle is not that your program inspires interest and engagement in your program, it's does the program inspire interest and engagement in STEM. So oftentimes we see participant surveys. We'd like to see pre- and post-participant surveys that say, by participating in this summer camp, I'm really more interested in, I'm much more interested in pursuing science in college, or I'm more interested in looking at science careers. Surveys that just say, I had fun, I really liked, you know, my teacher, you know, those are all great, but we're really trying to see how can programs inspire interest and engagement in STEM. So again, positive experiences, dispelling negative misconceptions about STEM, connecting what you're doing to career opportunities in STEM, connecting STEM to the participants' own interests and experiences. So again, how do you document that? Surveys, examples of your activities, examples of the lesson plans, where you can say, here's where we talk about, you know, careers in math, or that use math. Here's where we talk about fun things that the students get to do while they're engaging in our program. So again, examples, documentation as much as we can see. And again, survey summaries, not very helpful. Surveys where we can see all the questions, we can see the data, we can see everything in its raw form is much preferable. And then the last principle, and then we'll get into some questions and some specifics around Nevada. The last one just looks at underrepresented groups. A primary focus for STEMworks is to address the needs, identify programs that identify and address the needs of groups that are traditionally underrepresented in STEM. This is an example. We've got a note down here. We do not define, STEMworks does not define what underrepresented groups means. It might be specific minority groups. It might mean students with specific disabilities. It might mean, you know, girls in engineering, African American students in math. Whatever you're doing to address the needs of underrepresented groups in STEM and diverse learners, that's up to the program to define to help the reviewers understand. Again, you may not have a specific focus on any particular underrepresented groups. That's fine. Just be clear in that. Don't say, this is one of those cases where you might list off urban areas that you're working in and say you're addressing the needs of you know, a specific minority group. That, again, gets you part of the way. That helps us understand who you're talking about. But the accomplished programs for this principle will also be able to describe not only that underrepresented group, not only that diverse learner, but what the needs are for those diverse learners, the needs are for that underrepresented groups. What has traditionally contributed to their low representation in STEM, or low participation in STEM, and how are you as a program addressing those needs? So again, being complete, providing data, providing evidence, providing examples. That's the end of the principles. Again, I encourage you to go on the application site, download those principles, read through the rubric, really pay attention to the various levels for each principle, the criteria that are described in each, and really just try to make sure that you use that to organize your explanation and the evidence that you're providing as part of your application. With that, I just wanted to check. Brian, are you on the line yet? If not,
Brian isn't, but he did give me he allowed me to talk about the additional Nevada questions. I know we've got about 15 more minutes. Is that right, Mark?
I believe so, yeah. So just real quick, we had a question about programs that are already certified or already in STEMworks. Klaus, do you want to just mention that aspect for programs that are already in the database?
Absolutely.
And then I've got the How It Works site for Nevada open, and we can go through that specific information as well.
Thank you. Well, for programs that are already certified in STEMworks, they're already in the database, you do not have to reapply to these main 10 questions. You've already got your stamp of approval. You may decide to come back and, if you want to improve your standing on a principle or two where you haven't, got the highest rating, you can do that. But you've already, in a sense, cleared the first hurdle. What you need to do now is finish the Nevada-specific questions. And these are questions that the Nevada group has put together because they want to drill down in a few areas and expand in a couple of areas so that they can address Nevada's own particular areas of priority. One thing that Brian Mitchell, who is is one of the governor's advisors who's really working on this effort, let me know is that, in fact, if you make it through that second hurdle as well with the Nevada-specific questions, that you'll then be sort of in line. At least you'll have a better shot at about $5 million annually in funding that districts can apply for from the state. And most of these $5 million will go to STEM, he says, and one of the eligible categories that districts can apply for are programs that will be on this Nevada-specific STEMworks list. So that means that you'll have, you'll be in a better position to get those kinds of funds. So what I thought, Mark, if you could scroll down just a little bit and click on the link that says Nevada-specific questions, I wanted to give you a quick overview of how this works, and you can download them yourselves from that Nevada How It Works page on the STEMworks website. But these Nevada-specific questions give you some choices. You don't have to answer all of them, which is probably a good thing. It gives you a little bit more leeway to answer those areas where you feel you have strength. And so if you look, you'll see that there are 2 questions at the top that every program has to answer. And these were devised by our partners in Nevada who are very focused on these areas of priority. And the first of these is that whatever program you're presenting should really apply to all learners. And so they're looking for a program that can provide evidence of effectiveness in successfully engaging learners from underrepresented backgrounds in STEM. Now this, in a sense, is like an amplification of our own underrepresented groups principle. So it's not something you may already have addressed this in the main STEMworks application, but you should bear in mind that they have a particular focus that includes English language learners, racial and ethnic minority students, and poverty students from rural communities. And if you look at what they deem accomplished, it will include the fact that the program integrates best practices for English language learners beyond teaching vocabulary, such as teaching content and language concurrently. The reason why they're so focused on English language learners is that Nevada, of course, has an enormous population of English language learners. And if you come to Nevada hoping to be effective in schools across the state, then having a focus on English language learners is really quite important. Developing isn't quite as strong as that, but I think that if you want to think about Nevada, you probably want to make at least a showing as a developing program in this particular regard. What they don't want is a program that simply claims to be successful engaging learners from these different backgrounds, but then really not providing any evidence at all of this. So it's ideal if you can do that. In reality, it might be that there aren't a whole lot of programs that have been specifically tailored to English language learners, and I suspect that's okay. But I do think you want to think about how it is you can address this particular group. If you have more questions about this, the best person to speak with is Brian Mitchell, and Brian's email address is on the Nevada-specific page. The other one that Nevada is requiring you to respond to is the question about real-world application. To what degree does the program connect all learning opportunities toward a central, student-centered pursuit of explaining anchoring phenomena or designing solutions in the context of real-world problems? This is a strong priority for STEM leaders in the state. Again, it's something that appears in the main STEMworks rubric. There is, under the content section principle, a mention of the need for real-world relevance. But here, this is an opportunity for you to explain in greater detail how it is that you address real-world phenomena or developing solutions to real-world problems. And when states like Nevada actually add questions that reflect what's already in the main rubric, it's sending a signal that they think it's particularly important and that programs should spend particularly, a good deal of time and energy in thinking about these. So those are the two questions that everyone needs to answer. If you scroll down, Mark, you'll see that there are now additional priorities, and the Nevada folks would like you to answer one of these. So one of them has to do with the extent to which you have an interdisciplinary program. So do you support learners in drawing on and building connections within different domains and disciplines? And this would be interdisciplinary not only across STEM fields, but also potentially across other fields like writing, reading, social studies, et cetera. And they're quite interested in seeing if programs can have this interdisciplinary approach. But this is not a required question. So if you're a program that is dealing with math, and only math, you don't have to address this question. Another question is that of replicability across different districts. And this they do have a Nevada focus on in particular. They're looking for programs that can show that they can support differentiated models of implementation to replicate across different community districts and regions, and particularly in Nevada communities. So if you know the state and you believe that you can address this question showing differentiated models that you can implement for different kinds of communities across the state, this might be a good one to answer. The third of these addresses professional development in particular. And here again, it's something that is implicit in at least two of our principles, but it is much more explicit here. So if you're a professional development program, you might really want to consider addressing this one. In other words, figuring out the extent to which that the professional development also can include Nevada-specific local content showing that you have the ability to strike partnerships in the state of Nevada that will aid your professional development work. So again, this might be a stronger bet if you actually have some knowledge of Nevada or have done research about Nevada or have a presence in Nevada that would allow you to address this particular question. And they have, you'll notice in the rubric, they have a good deal of explanation about what sort of programs they would consider accomplished in that particular area. Now, for the last two, those are on the final page to scroll down there, thank you. There's one question of cultural identity and student interest. And so this in many ways expands on the final two principles that we have in our rubric. They're particularly interested in the degree to which the program values the cultural interests and identities of its attended audiences by making them essential aspects of the learning. So here, this can draw on ideas of cultural competence, for example, and it could possibly be helpful for you to consider specifically the culture that's likely to happen in Nevada. And again, English language learners in Nevada's very largest district, Clark County, which is one of the largest districts in the country, could drive some of your thinking, just by way of example, on this particular piece. And the final piece is assessment. To what degree does the program incorporate formative assessment strategies and tools that would support students and teachers throughout the program? And here they also have an aspect of cultural or cognitive models that might drive this formative assessment strategy rather than just sort of the traditional data-driven decision-making models. Here again, this is something that you don't have to do. It's something that you can choose to do if you feel you're particularly strong in this area. And again, if you want to have more background on these questions, Brian Mitchell would be the best person to help fill it out for you, to explain what the thinking was behind it that would be driving their own list of priorities. But again, an important piece to remember is that the first two principles here are the only ones you have to answer, or you have to answer both, and then you need to choose only one principle from the remaining list. Let me pause. I've spoken a lot. Yeah.
We have a question around, for the additional priorities, are programs allowed to address more than one?
I would think so. I mean, you might want to consider how you have, you know, what your own energies are and how much time you want to devote. But I would think so. You may want to ask Brian Mitchell that question. He probably could give you a more definitive answer. But in a way, you know, one way of looking at it that you might want to test with Brian is whether that gives you a better chance. You know, so for example, you address two of those optional categories, and you don't do so hot on one of them, but you do quite well on the other. That might allow you to increase your chances of doing well in the entire process. But again, Brian Mitchell would be the best person to answer that question.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, good. This is Sean Hill. This is not necessarily Nevada specific, and apologies if this was covered. I logged in a little bit late. I was curious if this whole presentation will be available after today with audio. And the follow-up is several of those sections that Mark went over had examples. And in looking back, I think I got them all. I took pretty good notes. But in looking back at this presentation, if it is available, those samples aren't marked which ones were developing and which ones were accomplished. And so I was wondering if the audio is available, we can determine that if we don't have it in our notes. If the audio is not available, I was wondering if we could somehow get a key to that.
Mark, do you want to take that?
Yeah, the entire webinar is recorded, so audio and the video. It's actually recorded as a video file, so that will be posted to the website within the next day or so. So you should be able to get all of that from the recording that will be posted. And it's
Great,
and we haven't really, again, because those were sort of condensed examples, you know, again, generally for most of the programs that are accomplished, they are maybe a little more detailed than some of those. We just wanted to try to provide some examples of fairly clear instances where programs are referring to the evidence, programs are referring to the documents, programs are providing points that are specific to the criteria in the rubric. So when you go back to look at them, you won't see that they're specifically rated as accomplished or developing, but it's more just examples or illustrations of the different, some of the different things to pay attention to for each of those principles.
Hi, this is Camilla at the Institute. I have a very quick question. There are the two required criteria specific to the Nevada questions, and It says 750 words or less. Is that 750 for both criteria or for each one of those?
I believe it's for each criterion.
Okay.
So it's 700 per criteria. You know, and I had a conversation with Brian about this, and he wanted to make sure that, you know, he didn't want people going on for pages and pages, but he wanted to make sure that you had enough time if you felt you wanted to be expansive that you could. And so I'm quite sure that he didn't want to limit you to 750 for both.
Okay, and then you may have already responded to this, so I apologize, but if we decide to go forward and as we are completing that application online, who would we address, like, detailed questions about it, to Mark or to Brian?
I think you would want to start with Brian, and if Brian feels that some of the questions you're asking are better answered by us, then he'll refer you to us.
Okay. Okay. And then I promise this is my last question. I may be getting ahead of myself, but you said that for programs that are already accomplished or rated accomplished, I guess that's going to be evident as we go through the application. Is there a place in the application to just say have already been vetted, or
the way that would work, if you're already in STEMworks through a different state or from a national process, then when you go in to log in, you can select your program, and then you should be carried through to a point where you can select the state.
Okay.
So that way, because if you've logged in before, which you presumably would have if you've got a program already in STEMworks, you can log in as that program. If you've forgotten your login information, then you can request it again. And then that will allow you to select your state and continue from there.
Okay. But that would be a new program, and we were on the page before. Yeah, we were. Okay. All right. Thanks. Nevada program. All right. Thanks.
And if you have any, as I mentioned at the beginning of the process, if you are a new program or returning program, as you go into the application site, sort of each step in that process, you'll get a confirmation back from the system, and if there's any problem during any of those points on the technical side, there's an email provided that comes directly to us on the WestEd side, where we can answer technical questions you have. But as Klaus said, Brian will be sort of your first line of questions around the process, the broader process, and especially around the timeline and the Nevada-specific questions. But there should be a point along each step where if you have immediate questions around the technical part, say you have a problem uploading documents, there's a place where you can get technical help. But again, Brian's your first person to talk to you about the process as a whole. Any other questions at this point? I think we're ready to wrap up. So if people have any questions, please let us know.
Hi, this is Valerie Butler. I had a quick question.
Sure.
If I know there are other states that you partner with, how do we find information about those and perhaps applying for similar opportunities? Do we need to wait for the email from Klaus?
But basically I always let people in our immediate network know about that, and so yes, it's been an email from me, and we put it on the roster as well. So just to let you know, for example, a Colorado process is still underway with a due date of the 18th of August. And we're expecting still to have processes later on this year in Iowa and Indiana at the least, and potentially in some other states too. But you know, we put those on our website, and I'm always, you know, send out my emails.
Okay, great. And how do so I go to the website to get the info about Colorado? I mean,
yes.
Maybe
if you
I might have missed your email.
Well, here's the thing about Colorado. Colorado doesn't actually have additional questions specific to the state. So Colorado is just trying to expand the list, and then they sort of kind of work with programs that operate in Colorado that are on that list and try to promote them within the state. So you wouldn't have to do anything further. If you're operating in the state of Colorado or plan to, you know, then you'd want to reach out and have a conversation with them to see if you can, you know, if they can continue to report to promote you as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And there is on the How It Works site for STEMworks, there's a drop-down menu that lists each of the states. Many of them, as Klaus said, are haven't opened up yet, but the information for Colorado is available there.
Yep.
Great.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, I think we're ready to wrap up. And again, thank you all for taking the time to learn about the Nevada process and STEMworks as a whole. Again, if you have any questions, the email for Brian is down at the bottom of the How It Works page for Nevada. If you have any technical difficulties going through the application process, there are ways to get in touch with us to help you through that. And this will be posted as an archived recording of the webinar. So be sure to check back if you have any questions that are answered by reviewing the webinar. So thank you all very much, and hopefully we'll be hearing from each of you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.